There is a certain kind of person who walks into a room and immediately, before saying a single word, has already scanned every face, registered every shift in energy, noticed who isn't making eye contact, and quietly prepared for at least 3 different versions of how this conversation might go. They picked up on the tension between 2 people in the corner before anyone else did. They already know from the slight pause before you answered that something is off. And the whole time they are doing all of this, they are also watching themselves do it, wondering if they are too much, too intense, too present in a way that other people simply are not. You probably know someone like this, or maybe you already know this is you. Most people would call this a gift, and they're not entirely wrong. People who are too aware tend to be the ones who sense the unsaid, who catch what falls between the lines, who understand others in ways that feel almost uncanny. They are the friends you call at 2 a.m. because somehow they always get it, the colleagues who read the room before the meeting even starts. But here is what almost nobody talks about. That same awareness, the thing that makes them brilliant at understanding the world, is also the thing that makes it very difficult to rest inside it. Because when you perceive everything, you also carry everything. Every tone, every silence, every look that lasted a half second too long. The gift and the weight are not 2 separate things. They are the exact same thing, just experienced from different angles. Psychology divides this kind of heightened awareness into 2 broad origins, and understanding which one applies to you or someone you love changes everything about how you relate to it. Branch A, the ones born this way. Research on sensory processing sensitivity, first formalized by psychologist Elaine Aron, suggests that roughly 15 to 20% of the population has a neurological system that is neurologically wired to process stimuli more deeply than average. This isn't metaphorical. Brain imaging studies show measurably greater activation in regions associated with attention, empathy, and integration of information. These individuals don't choose to notice more. Their brain simply does not have the same filter that others do. It was never installed. Branch B, the ones who learned. For others, hyper-awareness was not born, it was built. Usually in childhood, usually in environments where reading the room was not a hobby, it was a survival skill. When you grow up in a home where the mood could shift without warning, where a parent's silence meant danger, where you learned to track micro-expressions before you learned long division, your nervous system adapts. It builds the most sophisticated early warning system it can, because that system once kept you safe. The adult version of that child still has the system running, long after the danger has passed. Both of these people end up in the same place, inside a mind that never truly goes quiet, carrying an awareness they didn't entirely choose, and wondering why the world seems so much louder for them than it does for everyone else. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are simply someone whose nervous system learned, or was built, to hold more than most. Sign 1. You always know when something is wrong, even when nothing has been said. The scientific term for this is affective attunement, the ability to synchronize with another person's emotional state, often before any verbal communication has occurred. For most people, noticing that a friend seems a bit off requires obvious cues, a changed tone of voice, a direct statement, visible body language. For someone who is too aware, the signal arrives much earlier. It might be the 3-second delay before they replied to your message, the way their laugh landed slightly differently than usual, a posture that was almost the same as always, but not quite. The result is a strange and often lonely experience. You are already responding emotionally to something that the other person hasn't even named yet, and sometimes something they may actively deny. You find yourself in the uncomfortable position of knowing without being able to explain how you know. And when you try to articulate it, you often sound irrational to people who simply don't have the same access to the signal. Sign 2. Conversations replay in your mind long after they end. Psychologists call this post-event processing, a pattern where the mind returns to a social interaction, often repeatedly, not to relive pleasure, but to audit it. It goes like this. The conversation ends, the other person moves on, and you go back inside it. You replay the moment where you said that thing and wonder if it landed wrong. You analyze why they paused before responding to that particular sentence. You reconstruct the entire arc of the exchange, looking for the thing you might have missed or the thing you might have done that shifted the energy. In severe cases, this can last hours, sometimes days. The consequence is a kind of double exhaustion, the energy required to be present in the conversation, followed immediately by the energy required to mentally process the conversation afterward.
For someone who is too aware, a single dinner with friends can take more out of them than a full day of work. Not because they didn't enjoy it, but because their mind experienced it twice. Sign 3. You absorb other people's emotions like a sponge and can't always tell where they end and you begin. This is what researchers refer to as emotional contagion, the phenomenon by which one person's emotional state transfers, largely unconsciously, to another. Everyone experiences emotional contagion to some degree, but for people who are too aware, the effect is dramatically amplified. They don't just catch the emotion, they inhabit it. They walk into a room where someone is anxious and leave the room feeling anxious themselves, even if they never identified the source. They sit next to someone who is grieving and feel a weight descend on them that they carry home. The specific difficulty here is not just the absorption, it is the confusion that follows. Because the emotion feels entirely real from the inside, it is often mistaken for one's own emotion. You spend an hour trying to understand why you suddenly feel so heavy, not realizing you picked it up in the parking lot from a stranger who was crying in their car. The boundary between self and other, emotionally speaking, is more permeable for these people than it is for most, and that permeability has no off switch. Sign 4. You are perpetually braced, even when there is nothing to brace for. The psychological term is hypervigilance, a state of heightened alertness in which the nervous system continuously scans the environment for potential threats, even in objectively safe situations. What this looks like in real life is subtle but relentless. It is sitting in a perfectly pleasant conversation and still tracking for the moment it turns. It is enjoying a quiet afternoon, but finding it impossible to fully relax, because relaxing feels like lowering a guard that took years to build. It is being told everything is fine and believing it intellectually, while your body does not believe it at all. This is one of the cruelest aspects of being too aware. The hypervigilance does not feel dramatic. It does not feel like fear. It simply feels like paying attention. It has been there for so long that it registers as normal. Many people who experience this don't realize they are doing it. They simply believe that this is what thinking feels like. The consequence is a baseline level of tension that never fully releases, a nervous system that never fully lands, and a quality of tiredness that is difficult to explain to people who have never carried it. Sign 6. You struggle to let things go, not because you want to hold on, but because your mind won't release them. This is linked to what psychologists call ruminative processing, a form of cognition where the mind cycles through the same information repeatedly, not as a productive problem-solving strategy, but as an involuntary loop that the person cannot consciously stop. The experience is not the same as thinking a lot. Thinking a lot is intentional, directional, and ends when you choose to stop. Ruminative processing is involuntary. It arrives uninvited. The thought comes back not because you summoned it, but because something in the processing architecture of the mind refuses to file it away as resolved. And the frustrating paradox is this: the more aware you are, the more data points your mind collected during the original experience, and the more material the rumination has to work with. It is not a loop of one thought. It is a loop with texture, detail, and emotional weight returning in high definition. The consequence is that the past has a longer half-life for people who are too aware than it does for others. Old conversations remain warm, old wounds stay closer to the surface, and closure, the thing everyone tells you to seek, often feels less like a door that closes and more like a door that closes but that you can still hear. Sign 7. You often know what someone needs before they ask and quietly exhaust yourself providing it. This is sometimes called anticipatory caregiving, the tendency to preemptively meet the emotional needs of others before those needs are even articulated. It appears generous on the surface, and it often is, but beneath the generosity, the mechanism is more complicated, because this behavior is not purely altruistic. It is also, in many cases, a way of managing an environment. If you can anticipate what someone needs and provide it before they have to ask, you reduce the risk of tension, disappointment, or conflict. You keep the emotional temperature of the room stable. You remain in control of a situation that might otherwise become unpredictable. The result is that people who are too aware often become the person in every relationship who carries the invisible labor, the emotional management, the mood reading, the preemptive adjustments, while the other person simply experiences the benefit without ever seeing the work. It is exhausting in a way that is almost impossible to explain to someone who does not do it, because from the outside, nothing appears to be happening at all. When all of these signs have been present for long enough, when hypervigilance and emotional absorption and anticipatory caregiving become the ordinary texture of a life, the brain begins to do something additional. It starts to build walls. Not dramatic walls, not the kind anyone would notice from the outside, quiet ones. The kind that feel from the inside like independence or selectivity or simply preferring to be alone. Because the logic is sound. If you absorb everyone's emotions, then being around people is exhausting.
So you start managing your exposure. You become highly selective about who you let in. You develop the ability to seem present in a conversation while a part of you remains safely behind glass, watching, processing, but not fully arriving. Psychologists call this detachment as a defense mechanism, and it is one of the most common adaptations in people who are deeply feeling. The painful irony is this: the people who are most capable of profound connection are also often the ones who have learned to hold it at the safest possible distance, because they have felt what it costs to let it come close. There is also a secondary loop that develops. Because hyper-awareness generates so much data about people, about situations, about yourself, the mind of someone who is too aware often becomes its own echo chamber. Every social interaction generates material for reflection. Every reflection generates more awareness. More awareness generates more data. More data generates more to process. And somewhere inside all of that processing, the simple experience of just being somewhere, without analysis, without monitoring, without interpretation, becomes the thing that feels most out of reach. You cannot turn this off. That is the first and most important thing to understand. The solution is not to become less aware. The solution is not to care less, feel less, or notice less. Anyone who has tried to do that knows it doesn't work, and usually creates a kind of internal violence that costs more than it solves. The solution is to learn to work with the nervous system you actually have, rather than fighting the one you wish you had. Principle 1. Separate signal from noise, and learn which is which. Not every piece of information your awareness collects requires a response. This is a skill, and it is learnable. Begin by asking a simple question when your mind flags something. Is this information that requires action right now? If the answer is no, and most of the time the answer is no, you are allowed to note it and set it down. You are not obligated to resolve every tension you detect, process every emotion you absorb, or investigate every signal your nervous system sends. Your awareness is a tool. You are not required to use every tool all the time. Principle 2. Build containers, not walls. There is an important distinction between a wall and a container. A wall keeps everything out indiscriminately. A container holds things within a defined space and then closes. When you are with someone who is struggling, you can choose to be present with them inside a container, fully there, fully feeling, genuinely connected, and then when you leave, you close the container. You leave what is theirs with them. You do not carry it home. This is not coldness. This is sustainability. It is the difference between drowning with someone and swimming next to them. Practices like naming the transition, literally saying to yourself, I am leaving this behind at the threshold of a door, engage the prefrontal cortex and signal to the nervous system that it is safe to release. Principle 3. Rest the awareness intentionally. Because the awareness runs constantly in the background, rest for someone who is too aware does not happen passively. It requires deliberate conditions. The nervous system needs activities that are genuinely low stimulus, not screens, not social interaction, not content that requires interpretation. What actually works varies per person. For some, it is physical movement that demands enough attention to quiet the mind. For others, it is solitude in nature, or making something with their hands, or sitting in a space where they know they are not responsible for reading anything. The goal is not emptiness, it is relief. 15 minutes of genuine nervous system rest, practiced consistently, compounds over time in ways that are neurologically measurable. Your awareness is not a disorder. It is not something that happened to you that needs to be undone. It is a way of being in the world that carries real weight and also real beauty. The people who see too much are also the people who see things most others miss, the quiet courage in someone's posture, the love inside the thing that was left unsaid, the moment a room shifts and becomes something it wasn't before. The goal is not to see less. The goal is to stop being punished by your own perception and to start learning how to hold what you see without being held down by it. Think of it this way. A river that has no banks does not flow, it floods. The water is not the problem, the absence of shape is. What you are learning, slowly, imperfectly over time, is not how to be less of a river, it is how to have banks. If any part of this felt like someone finally said the thing you've been carrying around without words, leave a comment below. Even just one word. I read every single one, and sometimes the comments here become the most honest conversation on the internet. And if you know someone who is too aware, someone who always seems to know, who always seems to hold more than they let on, share this with them. Not as a diagnosis, just as a way of saying, I see you.